Hello friends! It is officially July, and so in today's video, we are going to walk through my June analytics for my Etsy and print-on-demand business. If you're new here, my name is Taylor and my channel is focused on all things Etsy and print-on-demand. If those are two things that interest you, I hope that you will boop that subscribe button down below so you can follow me and my journey to becoming a six-figure Etsy seller. Okay, so let's dive right in. What I have pulled up for you guys is my detailed analytics, and by default, it is already set at my all-time analytics. We're gonna dive into June here in a minute, but I figured this would be interesting to share with you guys, just to kind of give an update of where my Etsy store is at the moment. So this is for all time since I started my Etsy store. I shared in a previous video that I started my Etsy store in October of 2022. And so now we are in the very early part of July. And looking at my revenue from that time period, I am really close to approaching that $50,000 mark, which is super exciting. That's gonna be a next big milestone for myself. And just looking at the revenue specifically, you can see that it has really grown more so exponentially in the last 2 months. So starting in October, I wasn't open the first full month in October. I started about halfway through October, so not a lot going on there. And just starting an Etsy store, it's rare to have anything at all, so I was very proud of that in general. But anyways, just kind of skimming through, you can just see a little bit of my progress. In November, 1,700, December, 2,500, January, 3,600, 3,400. I dipped down a little bit in February and then pop back up in March, April, we can see May, and then the big kahuna, June, which is what we're gonna go through today. June obviously was a pretty great month, and I'm excited to dive into the analytics with you guys. So let's get to it. So as you can see, this is my month of June. I had over 13,000 visits to my store, 397 orders, a 3% conversion rate, which is a little bit higher than normal. If you looked at that on my all-time analytics, I was averaging around 2.5%, which I'm not mad at. Typically, what I have found online from others is that conversion rates for e-commerce typically range from about 1 to 3%. So really just staying in that range, I'm happy with that. And of course, being at the higher side of that range, I'm happy with as well. And then we can see the revenue over $14,000, which was really exciting. You can see I had a record day. This is an all-time record for me on June 4th, over $1,200 in revenue. I had a particular item that really was doing well at the end of May, and that kind of carried over into the beginning of June for the specific product type that it was. So that was awesome to see. I had a couple best sellers this month as well, and that really kept my sales relatively consistent. Of course, I definitely had the biggest peak in the beginning of the month as far as order volume and revenue, but I was really happy with what that looked like throughout the month of June. So we can see, if I just skim through, I'll start at the beginning again. So looking at June 1st, you will just skim through some of these numbers here. We can see my revenue each day. It spikes up there. And then just going through, you know, it has its ups and downs. Personally, what I have noticed with my store is that the weekdays are typically when I have the higher order volume, and on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, it's actually when my store is a little bit slower, I tend to notice. And I'm not sure if that just applies to me or if others experience the same. In my head, how I kind of rationalize that is that I feel that a lot of people on the weekends, they might be doing their shopping in person and going to stores in their area as opposed to doing online shopping, which I feel like people do more online shopping during the week when they're maybe sitting at their desk at work or they're bored. That's when I do online shopping, so maybe that's why as well. But we can see that was the month of June. So those were the revenue numbers. And I know something that a lot of you were interested in seeing is how shoppers found my store. So now just looking at what Etsy brought, we can see that Etsy brought majority of the traffic to my store. I'm getting a lot of organic traffic through Etsy and just the SEO that I'm utilizing with my listings. However, I did bring some traffic as well through Etsy ads, which I've made a whole video about my Etsy ad strategy. I'll be sure to link that up in the cards above in the description box as well, if that's something that you want to watch. I really do believe in Etsy ads. I think that it is a great way to boost your listings and just to get more eyeballs on your listings. So I am a firm believer there. However, I also have a little bit of social media, which I haven't touched on in a video yet. And the only social media that I do for my Etsy store is Pinterest. Now, I could make a video about Pinterest, but I feel like it would be really boring because I don't do a lot with it, to be honest. I just pin links to the listings that I already have. I'm not making Pinterest specific posts. I'm not trying to cater to the Pinterest algorithm, and I'm sure if I did, maybe I would see more traffic come from Pinterest. However, that isn't something that I've spent a lot of time doing. But by just posting my listings as pins on Pinterest, I am getting some traffic. And so if you do look at the breakdown, you'll see majority of it is Pinterest. I do also have Instagram and Facebook. However, I don't personally have an Instagram or Facebook for my Etsy store. They might have been shared maybe by somebody on a specific group, and just me kind of brainstorming as to what it could have come from. And then, like I said, Etsy ads. The direct and other traffic, I have clicked into this a couple times and it doesn't always give me specifics as far as where they're coming from. I have noticed that I will get traffic from certain research tools. And so my guess is, I know a lot of research tools have where you can look at other Etsy stores and look at successful listings and things of that nature. And that's what I'm assuming is happening, is maybe I have specific listings that others are seeing that are gaining traction, becoming bestsellers, and naturally people are going to do their research and look into those things, which I do the same thing. I look at other people's stores all the time, so it makes sense. But again, not a ton of the traffic is coming from this section, from the You Brought visits. It's really just Etsy. A lot of it is organic traffic, and I really attribute that to the Etsy ad strategy that I use. I think it really boosts the organic traffic for my store, as well as the SEO that I use, and really having a strategy there. So scrolling back up, I will take a look too at just the orders. I did have 397 total orders for the month of June, but I thought it might be good to just skim through the orders, just like I did the revenue, to see where I had the bulk of my orders. Now, June 1st, I had the busiest day where I had the most orders. However, I will say that on this day, the item that I was getting the most orders for, it was an item that people typically only bought one of. So I was getting a decent amount of orders, but the average order total, as far as revenue, was significantly lower. However, on some of these other days where, if you can remember, we had that really high revenue day, which, let me look back actually. My highest revenue day was actually on June 4th. But looking at my orders, I still had 27 orders, but that revenue was so much higher. I started to see some of my items that sell more in bulk, where people are buying more of those particular products and items. I was getting more of those orders on this date. So less orders, more revenue, really the ideal situation, at least for me. I love to see a bulk order come through. It's just very satisfying, and usually your profit margin's a little bit higher on that as you save on shipping. When people are purchasing more than one product, shipping tends to get a little bit cheaper. I'll take a look at conversion. Conversion is pretty consistent. I don't think that this is anything too crazy to look at. But it is fun to see how it might vary on certain days and fluctuate. Really, you just want to monitor if you're looking at this for your own store, just kind of seeing where you're consistently at. Definitely a red flag would be that you are getting a decent amount of views or any views at all really on a listing and you're never converting at all. At some point, you should be getting somewhere in that 1 to 3% conversion rate. My best recommendation would be if you have views on listings and they're not converting at all, it's time to go back to the drawing board in the sense of looking at your design and making sure that it really looks great on the mock-up that you put it on for whatever type of product that you're selling. So for example, with apparel is always a really great way of explaining this. Your design, if your design's great, but it doesn't look realistic on the mock-up, for example, the image, you haven't adjusted the transparency, so it just looks super bold and bright on the shirt and it doesn't look real. That might be a red flag to a potential customer and cause them not to convert on that listing and purchase that listing. Another thing is maybe your design just isn't that great. And I know sometimes it's hard to admit when our designs aren't that great. A great thing to do might be to show that design to maybe a close friend, close family member, and just get their feedback. It is important to get that feedback. Sometimes we have blinders on when we are creating designs, especially I think most of us aren't designers. We are just designing, but that doesn't make us designers by any means. So it's definitely important to get your friends, loved ones, people you trust, get their feedback on if the design is good or not. And also maybe ask for some feedback on how it could be better. Maybe it's just a color choice, a font that you're using with that design. That would be the first thing to take a look at with that. All right, so what we have pulled up here is my monthly statement for the month of June, because what everybody really wants to see is how much money that I took home, my profit. So let's just break down some of the fees, because with selling on Etsy, there are fees. I figured I could really break that down here and show you what it would look like on the backside of Etsy. What we see at the very top is your net profit on Etsy for June 2023 was $13,562.18. However, that is not what I take home, because there's still cost for product that I am selling on Etsy. So what this amount right here is just taking is my total sales and subtracting any of Etsy's fees that we're gonna break down on this page. So if we just look at my sales drop down, we can see that I had 403 total sales, and that equated to $16,725.58. I did have 5 refunds, as you can see, which I think can sound alarming, can sound like a lot, but relative to the amount of orders that I had, that's still less than 2%, which is what you can typically expect with a print-on-demand business with your items. There are things that happen sometimes, and it just is part of running a business. So then if we look at the fees, Etsy fees, everybody always wants to talk about Etsy fees. We can see the listing fees. So I did create more listings throughout the month of June, as well as every time you sell a product, you pay a relisting fee as well. So this is a combination of me listing new products and new designs, as well as people purchasing orders or purchasing products throughout my store. We can see the transaction fees and the processing fees. Those are just standard fees. I know a lot of people will see this amount, $1,700, and think, wow, that's a lot of money paying in fees. However, I am happy to be on Etsy and selling on Etsy, because Etsy, as you guys saw on my traffic sources, Etsy's bringing 75% of the traffic to my store. I wouldn't even have sales. I wouldn't have 403 sales, almost $17,000 of revenue coming through my store if it wasn't for Etsy bringing 75% of those buyers to my listings. So it's the price you pay. I think it's worth it at this time. Maybe in the future I'll change my mind and try something different, like opening a store on Shopify. Who knows? But right now it works for me. I'm content with it. Etsy, they gotta get paid too. So I also do want to touch on listings, because I get the question a lot of how many listings do you have? How many listings did you have when you started to gain momentum? And I don't think that me sharing my number will mean that that's the same number for you or for anybody. However, I do think that you need some more listings under your belt, more so not because it's going to be a magic cure to getting traffic and getting sales and there's going to be a number that you hit that just floods your store with sales. However, I think that listing and creating listings over time and practicing the process is what is going to eventually get you to where you want to be. And for some, that might be 100 listings. For some, that might be 500 or 1,000 listings, just because you need to gain the experience in the process. With that experience, your listings will improve. And I am a big advocate for quality over quantity. I don't recommend and never will recommend just flooding a store with listings just to have listings, because that won't make a store successful. It could if they're great listings. However, if they're not great listings, they're just not going to sell. So as far as my store and where I am at, I started the month right around 800 listings. It might have been like 803 or something like that. I don't know the exact number. However, I ended the month, I can say where I'm sitting right now, I ended the month with 817 listings. And so at this point in my store, I have listings that weren't successful, that do expire throughout the months as well. And so at that point, I usually make the decision if I want to try again with those listings, maybe revamp them. Sometimes I have listings that I go back and look at and I can identify where I went wrong in the beginning. For example, I look at the mock-up, I look at even the design, the SEO, that's a big one. My SEO in the beginning was not great. But so I can identify things like that in my listings at this point. And sometimes if I think the design is worth it and it's worth giving it a second shot, I'll just revamp it and renew it. However, there are some listings that I don't know what I was thinking and I just delete them. So I kind of teeter around. I have some listings expire, I'm adding some listings, and I'm just kind of repeating that cycle. Now, if we scroll down, I'm gonna just close these. Let's look at marketing. So marketing, those are those beloved Etsy ads. I personally do love running Etsy ads. I think it's worth it right now for my store. I'm looking to grow, and so I need more eyeballs on my products to understand what's working, and Etsy ads gives me that opportunity. So as you can see, I spent $300 on Etsy ads, which makes sense because my budget is $10 a day. There was 30 days in the month of June. I spent $10 a day, the full budget, on Etsy ads. I did have some sales from offsite ads this month, which is, for me, it's very uncommon. Before this month, I had only had 1 or 2 sales from offsite ads. So that was interesting to see. I had a little bit more this month. I automatically am opted in for offsite ads at this point, as my store has generated over $10,000 in revenue. If you have not generated over $10,000 in revenue, you can opt out for offsite ads and not pay the extra fee that you inquire by selling through an offsite ad. However, because I'm already opted in for it automatically, I have them automatically. However, I have had the question before on if I do recommend them or not, and I've been opted in for them from the beginning. As I said, I haven't generated a ton of sales from offsite ads. However, I have generated sales from others' offsite ads. That's confusing. So I have gotten emails, and I'll put a screenshot of what those emails look like, where it shows that I generated a certain amount of sales from offsite ads in general, meaning somebody else had somebody click into their listing from offsite ads, and then they came to my listing as a recommendation from that person's listing, and I generated the sale from it. So let's talk about what I actually bring home. What is my profit for the month of June? So what we look at first in order to find my total profit is this net profit. So this is my revenue after anything that I paid into Etsy. And we have $13,562.18. Now, actually in this next tab, I have my invoice summary for what I paid my print provider in the month of June. And we can see this total invoice amount is for $10,044.23. So I'm gonna subtract that from my profit, my net profit from our last slide. And that gives me $3,517.95. And so what I would do to determine my profit margin is I will take this number and I will divide it into my revenue number for the month of June, which was $14,189.89, which gives me a profit margin of 24.7%. If you have any questions about my June analytics or Etsy and print on demand, definitely leave them in the comments down below. I will be reading all of the comments and responding to as many as I can. I also do offer coaching opportunities if you are interested in some additional feedback for your Etsy and print on demand business, and you can find links to that in the description box down below. If you found value in this video, I would also greatly appreciate if you hit that like button. And while you're down there, if you're not already subscribed, I would love for you to boop that subscribe button and join me on my channel where I share analytic videos like this and tips and tricks on how you can grow your Etsy and print on demand business as well. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next one.